Our speaker today, I had the opportunity to meet with him a couple times, and I would just start with impressive, factual, and impressive. He's the CEO of ReliabilityFirst. It's federally chartered regulatory organization. It's under FERC and North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC. First Reliability has independent oversight of over 300 entities, including PJM, power companies, and generators. So let's just get straight to it. Mr. Gallagher, welcome.
Well, first, thank you, Jeff and Ken, who's in Florida right now, for inviting me and for the important work that Pittsburgh Works does together. You know, you're filling a really valuable need for this community. It's an example for others, bringing together leaders from manufacturing, from the energy industry, and from economic development. And that collaboration and that communication is critical to our future success. And I think our collective energy future is of vital importance too, because to me, our energy future really is our future. It's said that energy is only 7% of this nation's economy, but it's also said that it's the first 7% of this nation's economy. And what that means is, if you don't have energy, you can't drive the economy, and you certainly can't meet your environmental objectives. I'm a power system engineer. I've spent the last 37 years of my life working on electric system reliability. And my job has always been to ensure that the public who I serve has a reliable, secure, resilient supply of electricity. And that's the perspective I'm going to bring to you today. So thank you for your attention. So a few words about ReliabilityFirst. We were formed coming out of the 2003 Northeast blackout, which I'm sure all of you remember. We're one of 6 independent regulatory agencies that oversees the North American bulk electric system. When I say bulk electric system or grid today, think high voltage, the generators and the high voltage transmission lines. We get our statutory authority from the federal government, from the Energy Policy Act of 2005. ReliabilityFirst and my 5 peers report up through NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, through FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I promise that's the end of the acronyms. And our responsibilities and our authorities and our duties and really our obligations are to oversee over 300 utilities in 13 states in the District of Columbia to make sure that they provide secure, safe, reliable power to the customers. That's my job. We do that by actually going on site, auditing utilities against rules that we've established. I do have the authority from the federal government to issue penalties for noncompliance with those standards. We do that. But it's not the only thing we do. You can't punish your way to excellence. So there's a lot of things we do that are proactive that help the industry seek excellence and seek continuous improvement. Outreach, like today, is a big part of that. I have a team of fantastic experts that work with me, some of which are in the audience today. I've been the CEO of ReliabilityFirst since it formed 20 years ago. We don't own or operate any electric system assets. We don't facilitate markets. We don't have any political agendas. We don't advocate for any kind of a resource or fuel type. We are an independent, objective, transparent source. We're not lobbyists. Our lens is reliability, pure and simple. And that's the perspective I'm going to bring to you today. I think we all agree that our country has embarked on an energy transition. And specifically, we're moving away from fossil fuels, basically anything that you burn, and we're moving towards more renewable sources, which would be solar and wind. At ReliabilityFirst, we describe this in terms of a trilemma. It's a triangle, and there's 3 legs to it, like most triangles have, which you can learn on Sesame Street. One leg is reliability. That's the part I can talk to you about, making sure that there's reliable service to our customers, to the public. The second leg is the environment and making sure that we don't harm the earth. And the third is economics, making sure that we can afford to do the things we want to do. The challenge for policymakers and many of you in this audience today, is that you have to determine which of those legs is most important and how you're going to prioritize it and how fast you're going to do that. And you also have to understand the trade-offs. If you emphasize one leg, what happens to the other two? Because I should have mentioned to you, those three legs of that triangle are mutually dependent. So something that you do on one leg is going to impact the other two. So you need to understand those trade-offs and be willing to accept them. Right now, there's a heavy emphasis, both at the state and federal level, on the environmental leg of that triangle. In the electricity business, things can get very technical very quickly. I'm a power system engineer. I'd love to talk to you about them. I don't think you want to hear about them. But the North American electric grid has been described as the most complicated machine that man has ever built. It literally takes thousands of experts working every day to keep that machine working properly and optimized. But at its simplest form, the problem that we have in front of us right now that Mike talked a little bit about, the problem that's facing the grid in the future is really a math problem. And it's not calculus, it's just arithmetic. Here it is. The supply of electricity has to exactly match the demand for electricity at all times. No exceptions. Sounds really simple. Well, electricity has to be created and delivered and consumed in the same instant. Think about that for a second. Somebody once described it to me as shooting a bullet at a bullet and expecting it to hit dead center every time. Can you do it? Yeah. It's not easy. And it happens every day, though, every second of every day. And I think we take it for granted when we flip a switch or press a button on a remote. The demand for electricity, or what we call in the industry load, that's going up. Most forecasters agree that demand for electricity in this country is growing at 2 to 3 times more than it has for the past couple of decades. I'm going to talk about what's driving that in just a few minutes. But if the demand is going up, if we get back to that arithmetic problem, to balance it, you would say if the demand side is going up, then the supply side should go up, right? Well, that's not what's happening. We're actually removing supply. So demand up, supply down. I'm not saying we're not adding anything, we are. But we're not adding things as fast as we are taking them away. And the types of things that we're adding, the types of generators that we're adding, they don't produce as many hours of electricity as the ones that we've enjoyed in the past. And you can see this in numerous reports from my organization, ReliabilityFirst, from NERC, from PJM. We're heading towards shortfalls in supply. We've been saying this, been warning about this for about the past 5 years. So what's going on with the supply? Why is it going down? If you look at the course of history in energy development, we've always turned to different fuels to meet our energy needs. And if you study it, there's 4 facts that I always come away with when I look at it. The first one is when we discovered a new source of fuel, we added it and integrated it to the ones that we already had. We didn't take things away, we just added more. And that gave us a lot of diversity in our fuel supply, and diversity is a great tool for reliability. The more different things you have, the better. It's also great for costs, and you can make a case it's great for the environment. So adding things to what you already have really satisfies all 3 legs of that trilemma I talked to you about. Second fact, when we predominantly moved from one fuel source to another, we did it because it became self-evident. The new fuel source was more economical, it was more efficient, it was more reliable, it was better for consumers. So we switched. The third fact, when we did make one of those switches from one predominant fuel to another one, it took decades, sometimes 40 or 50 years for us to make that switch. And then the fourth fact, from a purely electricity standpoint, when we switched fuel sources, it didn't really change the way electricity was made. In its most basic terms, to make electricity, what we do is you heat something up and you make a massive piece of iron spin in a magnetic field, and that creates electricity. So you can change the fuel source, but that really didn't change radically how we were creating electricity. So great history lesson. Why am I telling you that? So I want you to think about that, and then I'm going to tell you about what we're doing right now, what's in front of us right now in the energy transition. So the first thing is we want to move into new fuel sources, renewable ones, solar and wind primarily, and we want to remove completely, if we can, the fossil fuels. Remember, we've never done that before. We've always added to what we had. Second, we're not moving to renewables because it's self-evident, because they're cheaper, because they're more effective, because they're more efficient, because they're more reliable for customers. We're forcing it. We're picking the environment leg of that trilemma, and that's the one that we're enforcing. The third point, we want to do this by most prognostications in 10 to 15 years, not 4 or 5 decades like we've always done it in the past. And then the last point, from an electricity standpoint, the way that renewables produce electricity is radically different than the way traditional spinning masses produce electricity. Renewables, like wind and solar, use microprocessor-based things called inverters, and they try to emulate the electricity that is created by a spinning mass. And they do a really good job of it, but they cannot emulate every aspect of it. And there are some really critical characteristics of a spinning mass in the electric system that we've got to have those things for the system to stay reliable. And we just cannot emulate those right now with inverters and with solar and wind farms. So we're entering uncharted territory. So what are these characteristics I was talking about that we can't replicate with the new generation? So we're gonna have to go a little bit deeper than the math problem for just a second. I'm gonna use some technical terms. You don't have to remember these. You don't have to learn about them, I promise you. But there are some characteristics like inertial response, black start capability, fault currents, frequency response, frequency control, load following, ramping. All of those things are critical to those thousands of people that sit in control centers trying to make the supply and the demand match all the time, shooting the bullets at bullets. Right now, the only way, unfortunately, to produce those characteristics is with the type of resources we've always had. The ones that spin, the ones that are fueled by fossil fuels. If we don't have those essential reliability characteristics from the generators, little problems on the power system become big problems. And minor outages cascade into area-wide blackouts. And then once we have a blackout, we can't restart the system. So essentially what I'm telling you is it is not possible right now with the technology that's available to us to have an electric system that is purely renewables. We just can't do it. It won't be reliable. You won't be able to satisfy that leg of the trilemma. So earlier I said that the generation that we're adding to replace existing resources doesn't produce as many hours of electricity as the prior resources. So it takes 5 to 7 times more renewable capacity to replace traditional electric generations. And this because of something called capacity factor. So if you buy a generator, it'll say on the generator it's capable of producing 10 megawatts. And that means in any instant of time, it can produce the 10 megawatts. What capacity factor is over all the time, over the whole year, how many times, how many hours could I get that 10 megawatts out of that generator? That's capacity factor. And so when you look at renewables, they are subject and dependent upon the weather. And as much as we love the environment and respect it, it doesn't always love and respect us back. So sometimes the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. That's why renewables are sometimes called intermittent resources. And predicting the future availability of that is basically coming down to weather forecasting. And I think we all agree we're pretty good at that over a couple of day period, but like predicting the weather for an entire year to plan your electric system, I don't think we would do a very good job of that. Batteries are a great complement to intermittent or renewable resources because they can help you ride through the times when the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing. However, batteries right now at utility scale can only last for 2 to 4 hours. Now there's some really exciting research going on. We might get to 8 to 10. It's not ready yet. So they can help, but only so much and only for so long. And remember, batteries are not generators. Batteries are time machines. Batteries take extra electricity you have at one moment in time, and they shift it to another one. And they convert electrical energy into chemical energy back to electrical energy. But it's not a generator, it's sort of a storage device. So I get asked a lot, what type of generator is best? Should it be coal, gas, nuclear, solar, wind, hydro, and to me the answer is all of them. Every type of generator comes with pros and cons, with weaknesses and deficiencies. The more diversity you have in your generation fleet, the better. Remember, I'm a reliability engineer, so the more diversity you have for that leg of the trilemma, the better. They can actually cover for each other's weaknesses, and we need that. There's something called common failure mode, and that is when you put too many of your eggs in one basket, you're too dependent on one simple thing, no matter what it is in life, and that one simple thing is not there. It prevents you from doing what you want to do. So we don't want that to happen to our electricity generation. We don't want it to be solely one source. For example, in 2023, in June, over the middle part of the country, the wind wasn't blowing. And there are about 6 gigawatts of wind turbines in that part of the country. And on this day, this 24-hour period, the wind wasn't blowing across all of it. And out of the 6 gigawatts, we were only able to produce 300 megawatts of generation. If you do the math, that's a 99.5% reduction in the amount of generation you were counting on from wind then. That's what I'm talking about. That's common failure mode. And it's not just wind, it's gas too. February 2021, Winter Storm Uri in Texas, in northern Oklahoma, when over 200 people died because they didn't have enough electricity. Almost 60% of the gas generation was either out of service or severely derated because the generator was frozen or the fuel supply was not available. So it's not just wind, it's every type. So you need to layer these so that they can protect against each other. Okay, let's move on from supply side. I think I've established for you the supply is going down. We're not adding things as fast as we need to. The things we're adding don't provide all of the essential attributes that we need going forward. Let's talk about the demand side, because I said I would talk about what's driving that. Our country is on a path towards greater electrification. Mike talked about it a little bit. It's driven largely by energy policy at the state and federal level. We're moving towards all electric houses, office buildings, restaurants, hotels. Heating and cooking will all be electric in the future. We're electrifying the transportation sector. If you get as many Amazon packages as my wife and I and our 7 kids get during a week, there's a lot of electric Amazon trucks in your driveway. People are driving electric cars. We're onshoring key industries like chip manufacturing. I just heard during the congressional hearings for incoming President Trump's cabinet members that we want to do more shipbuilding in this country, which is a massive demand. All those things are driving up the demand for electricity, but probably the biggest one are these really large concentrated loads. Things like hydrogen processing plants, things like crypto mining, and probably primarily data centers. So data centers use as much electricity in some cases as a small city. 1 to 2 gigawatts has been proposed in some cases. 1 to 2 gigawatts is enough electricity for almost 2 million residential customers. And that load is put on the electric system in a single spot, and we're supposed to be able to supply that. And the power system is not designed to do that, especially not on the timescales that we're given. These data centers depend on a steady, constant, reliable supply of electricity 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. They very seldom shut down. They are critical, absolutely critical to the future of this country. The data centers, I don't know, emerging from the pandemic, think about what your life would have been like or what your business would have been like if you didn't have the internet or streaming at home. That's provided by data centers. Data centers are critical for our financial systems, for our healthcare, for our national security, and for our position among the world's leaders in AI. So we've got to find a way to serve the data centers. We have a math problem. So what do we do about it? Well, energy policy is critical. For the first time ever last year, there's a bunch of experts from across the industry that work with NERC, and they identify the top risks facing the electric service to customers in our country. For the first time ever, energy policy was listed as one of those top risks. So it's really, really important. And neither I personally nor my organization would ever deign to tell Pennsylvania or any of the states that we work with what your energy policy should be. But I do think we can help. And we can help by providing you with some questions that you should be asking so that you can deal with that trilemma from an informed position and so that you can make the best energy policy possible. So if you'll indulge me, just a few questions for you. What level of reliability of service of electricity do you wish to achieve? How much is that going to cost? How much infrastructure do you need? Do your constituents understand that level you're seeking? Do they accept it? That's the reliability leg. For the environmental leg, are you concerned with the environment of your state, of your city, of the country, of the world? What's the overall environmental impact of the decisions that you're making? We talk a lot about carbon and greenhouse gases and global warming, but what about the impacts of mining, water use, water pollution, and the amount of carbon that's emitted when you start to build these resources? And what's the useful life of these resources? We don't talk about this very often. What happens when they reach the end of that life? What do you do with them? Can you recycle them? Do they have to go in a landfill somewhere? Are they going to, in turn, put hazardous chemicals or heavy metals back into the earth, into the water? What happens to the site where they used to be? Is land use important to you? I mentioned it takes 5 to 7 times more renewables than it does traditional generators for the same amount of electricity. A typical solar farm uses about 10 times as much land for an equivalent amount of megawatts as a traditional power plant does. And then is your energy policy going to support the new industries and the current industries that you have in your state that you want to continue to support? You know, at present, I talked about those reliability characteristics and how important they are for the reliability of the system. They're also important for manufacturing. You cannot run an arc furnace off of an inverter-based resource. It has to be something spinning to get that to go. And I think all of us learn more about supply chain than we ever wanted to coming out of the pandemic. But I want to make sure we're applying what we learned. So is there enough manufacturing capability in the world to support your intended goals in your state energy policy? Minerals, post-processing of those minerals, steel, transformers, towers. You know, the International Energy Agency, which is an independent worldwide agency, estimates we do not have enough minerals in the world to support our stated goals going over the next 10 years. That means we cannot build the number of solar panels and batteries that we want to build. We don't have the minerals in the world to do it. And then the last leg is the economy, and obviously how much is all this going to cost. So I'm sure there's other questions, but those are a good starting point for you. So what can you do right now? The biggest thing policymakers can do is to slow this thing down a little bit. I'm very confident over time that we can achieve a far cleaner and greener grid. I don't know if you realize it, but in the last 15 years, we have reduced carbon emissions from the electric power sector by 60%, 60%, and we can keep doing more. I'm just concerned that if we do this too fast, we can't do it reliably in the amount of time being given because the current state of technology does not support some of the things we want to do. So my advice is to start with those essential characteristics, determine how much of that you need working with your utilities and PJM to stay reliable, and determine what kind of resources can provide that to you that best satisfies that trilemma. And then anything in excess of that is when you can start to focus on the other two legs of that trilemma, the economy and the environment. The great thing there is it helps in two ways. It gives us more time to catch up, for supply chain to catch up, and it gives you more time for a lot of the technologies to catch up to keep the costs down. And again, as I said before, take an all the above approach. Pennsylvania has a lot of coal, natural gas. You produce a lot of electricity. A lot of your neighbors are counting on you to help them with their goals. Try not to turn away from one of the ones you have. And then work with other states. Other states are counting on you, and electricity, unfortunately, does not respect the laws of man, does not respect geopolitical boundaries. It goes where physics tells it to go. So things that are happening in Maryland right now are going to impact Pennsylvania, and we would love to put you in touch with representatives from those states. So there are a lot of resources for you. NERC does a lot of analysis and provides a lot of great, very consumable information for policymakers, the industry, the public. Their website's nerc.com. ReliabilityFirst has a lot on our website. PJM does. Our 5 peer regions have a ton of things. There's lots of stuff there that you can use to help you. I said a lot of very gloomy things, and it's a gloomy day out there, and the Steelers lost their playoff game. I'm really sorry. Am I just fear-mongering? And I assure you, I am not, okay? I told you about those reports. If you look at those, you'll see the trend line over the last 5 years. It's getting worse and worse. We're heading towards a supply shortage. Prices are going up. I think you all see that. You all feel that. Extreme weather events are increasing. Over the last 11 years, we've had 5 of what they call 1 in a 100-year weather events. And we've seen shortages on wide areas, like I already mentioned, Winter Storm Uri in 2021. That impacted the electric system. And there are events across the world that you can look at that are harbingers of what's coming to us. There are countries that are ahead of us in some of this work. I encourage you, just Google Germany's electricity situation, and you'll learn a lot about the path that they are on. So in closing, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I also want to offer the support and help of Reliability First to any of the policymakers as you navigate the energy transition. We are an independent resource for you. We serve the public. That's who I answer to. I'm really confident if we all work together, we can continue to enjoy the high level of reliability of electricity that we've all come to not just enjoy, but to expect and now to demand. And as the CEO of PJM says, we still have time. We just don't have any time to waste. And we really have to get this right. There's too much at stake. So thank you very much for listening to me.